Many people think mesothelioma is a disease of the past, a leftover from the days when asbestos was everywhere in American industry, when shipyard workers and construction crews and factory employees breathed in its toxic fibers without knowing the danger. Some people are under the mistaken impression that the U.S. has banned asbestos, but whether they know the truth about this or not, the theory is that once we regulated asbestos and reduced its use, mesothelioma started to fade and even had a foreseeable end. But brand new research published just this month tells a more complicated and more troubling story. And today I want to share it with you, because if you're concerned about mesothelioma, and if you're watching this video, I suspect you are, this research matters. I'm Terri Oppenheimer. I've been writing about mesothelioma and asbestos for the website mesothelioma.net for over a decade. And today I want to walk you through what investigators at Sylvester Comprehensive Cancer Center at the University of Miami are calling the most comprehensive national and state-level analysis of mesothelioma burden ever conducted in the United States. This study tracked mesothelioma incidence, mortality, and disability burden across all 50 states over a 33-year period from 1990 to 2023. And what they found is kind of confusing. It challenges the notion that mesothelioma is simply fading away. Here's a paradox in plain terms. Age-standardized rates of mesothelioma incidence and mortality, that means the rates that account for changes in the size and age of an affected population, those did decline over those 33 years. They declined by roughly a third, and that's a lot, and it's genuinely good news. It reflects decades of asbestos regulation and reduced industrial use. But here's what those falling rates don't tell you. The actual number of people diagnosed with mesothelioma every year didn't go down, it went up. Because the U.S. population has grown and aged, the number of people diagnosed with the disease increased by nearly 30% over the study period. Annual deaths climbed, and the disease's disability burden, which isn't just death but time living with the illness and impairment, has risen by 14% since 1990. The study's co-lead author explained that declining rates don't necessarily mean fewer lives affected. When you look at absolute numbers and disability, mesothelioma remains a substantial public health problem. That's not a dismissal of the progress that's been made. The regulations and reduced asbestos use mattered and continue to matter. But the idea that mesothelioma is behind us, that it's a historical problem we've largely solved, is just not supported by the data. Now, I'm going to take a break here to ask you a quick favor. If you find these videos helpful, please hit the like and subscribe buttons below. It makes it easier for other people who need this information to find us. Also, if you have questions or there's a topic you'd like to see addressed in a future video, send me a note in the comment section. And make sure you watch until the end, because I'm going to give you valuable information on where to find resources that will make a real difference for you. Now, I want to talk about one of the most striking findings in this research, because it's one that I think many people, including many in the medical community, don't fully appreciate. And that's what this study reveals about mesothelioma in women. Most people think of mesothelioma as a man's disease that affects men who worked in shipyards and on Navy vessels, or men who installed insulation in buildings or worked in construction, or men who repaired industrial boilers and handled asbestos-containing materials in factories. Historically, that picture's been largely accurate. Men have carried the majority of the mesothelioma burden in this country, and that reflects decades of occupational exposure in male-dominated industries. But the study uncovered something that should change how we think about this disease and about who's at risk. Among men, both incidence and mortality rates fell sharply over the 33-year study period. The cohorts of men who were heavily exposed occupationally in the mid-20th century are gradually aging out, And that reduction in industrial asbestos use is showing up in the numbers. But among women, the picture's dramatically different. Declines in women's mesothelioma rates have only been modest, and in many states, they've been statistically insignificant. In fact, female mesothelioma incidence actually increased in 22 states over the study period. Female mortality rose in 18 states, particularly in parts of the Midwest and Appalachia. The gap between men's rates of illness and women's rates isn't closing, it's widening. That's right, men's rates are falling and women's are rising. Why? Because mesothelioma in women generally does not come with the kind of clear occupational exposure history that we associate with this disease. For women, mesothelioma often does not come with a neat occupational history. Environmental exposure, para-occupational exposure from family members, that means exposure from asbestos brought home on a husband or father's work clothes, and legacy asbestos still present in schools, homes, and public buildings all seem to play a much larger role in women's mesothelioma than most people realize. That para-occupational pathway or secondary exposure is particularly worth understanding. Research has shown that living in a household with someone who worked regularly with asbestos can raise a family member's mesothelioma risk as much as tenfold. The spouse or child who did the laundry or shook out the work clothes, who hugged a father when they came home covered in construction dust, they were being exposed too, and now they're being diagnosed. A 1980 federal assessment estimated that roughly 250,000 teachers and school staff, a workforce that skews heavily female, were also regularly exposed to asbestos-containing materials from school buildings across the country. Those exposures are showing up in diagnostic statistics today. The clinical implication of all of this is important. The researchers behind this study are urging clinicians to be vigilant about mesothelioma in women and in patients without an obvious occupational asbestos history. If a woman presents with unexplained pleural effusion, progressive shortness of breath, or persistent chest pain, and if anyone in her household worked in shipbuilding, construction, insulation, manufacturing, or any of the other industries where asbestos was common, mesothelioma needs to be on the differential diagnosis. It can't be dismissed simply because the patient isn't a male industrial worker. You need to dig deeper and ask about her family members' occupations, and hers too. She could be a teacher or a nurse exposed in their hospital or school. The geography of mesothelioma is another crucial finding from this research. Maine, Alaska, Washington, Minnesota, and other states consistently carry higher incidence, mortality, and disability burdens. Each of those states tells a different story. Maine and Washington reflect legacy shipyard exposure. Some of the most intensive asbestos use in American history happened in the shipyards along the Atlantic and Pacific coasts. Minnesota's burden is linked in part to iron ore mining and the naturally occurring mineral fibers associated with that industry. And Alaska has its own unique exposure history tied to its geography and its industrial development. What the researchers found is that the national map of mesothelioma does not look like a smooth gradient. It looks, as they put it, like a patchwork quilt stitched together by local industry, geology, and history. A national average tells you very little about the risk in any given state or community because it turns out that mesothelioma is a geographic disease. Examining state-level data lets us see where prevention, remediation, and surveillance efforts are most urgently needed. Unfortunately, the efforts are not evenly distributed. Now, maybe the most sobering finding in this entire study, and the one that I think carries the greatest urgency for the mesothelioma research and treatment community, is what has not changed over those 33 years, and that's survival. The researchers tracked the mortality to incidence ratio across the full study period. That's a measure that serves as a population-level gauge for how likely patients are to survive their diagnosis. That ratios remain close to 1 throughout the entire period from 1990 to 2023. 1 means that for every person diagnosed with mesothelioma, approximately 1 person dies from it. It means that despite immunotherapy, new surgical approaches, and everything else that's changed in oncology over the past 3 decades, population-level survival for mesothelioma has not meaningfully improved. From a patient's perspective, this is the hardest message. Despite all our scientific advances, mesothelioma remains one of the most lethal solid tumors. New therapies, including immune checkpoint inhibitors, have begun being used in clinical practice in recent years, and they've shown real benefits for individual patients. But those benefits have not yet shifted survival statistics at a national population scale. That gap between what we can do for a carefully selected individual patient and what's actually happening in communities across the country represents both the challenge and the opportunity that lies ahead. And then there's this. Mesothelioma is, according to this research, overwhelmingly preventable. In 2023, nearly 96% of U.S. mesothelioma deaths were still attributable to occupational asbestos exposure. That proportion basically has not changed since 1990. This disease is not a biological mystery. It has a known cause. It can be prevented by eliminating exposure to that cause. The United States has never fully banned asbestos, and it remains embedded in older buildings, ships, and infrastructure across the country. The researchers are clear on this point. Reducing mesothelioma's future burden requires continued vigilance in asbestos remediation and environmental protection, alongside sustained investment in more effective treatments. Prevention and treatment are inseparable. What this research tells us, taken together, is that mesothelioma is not a disease of the past. It's an evolving disease that's shifting across populations, concentrating in certain geographies, and disproportionately affecting women in ways that have not been fully recognized. It's still shaped by exposures that happened decades ago, and in some places, by exposures that are still happening today. To review, the findings of the Sylvester Comprehensive Cancer Center study shows that while mesothelioma rates have declined overall, the absolute number of diagnoses and deaths has risen, that women are being increasingly affected in ways that reflect environmental and para-occupational exposure pathways, that geography plays a powerful and underappreciated role in mesothelioma risk, and that survival from this disease has not meaningfully improved at the population level, despite advances in treatment. These are findings that matter for patients, for families, for clinicians, and for anyone committed to making sure that mesothelioma gets the research attention and public health response it still urgently deserves. You can visit mesothelioma.net for resources on mesothelioma research, treatment, and finding the support you need. Or you can call us at 1-800-692-8608 or use the live chat feature on the website to work with someone right away. As for me, remember to post your questions below, and I'll see you next time.